Hi and welcome. I call this serving an inevitable mistake. I typically refrain from calling these episodes because an episode at least, is something that a person have in an insane asylum. And I suppose there will be times where it would be appropriate to call these servings episodes. This one will be a unstructured musing about an happening last night. Ernst Rutz, our hero and our local champion, went to Parliament to protest the amendment in the Constitution where underused farmland can be reappropriated and put to better use and thus be confiscated without compensation. The government's acronym for it is EWC, expropriation without compensation. That is what EWC stands for, the dreaded word EWC. Ernst made a mistake, if I have to criticize him. However, and I did look up if there is such a word. I mean, serendipity is a word for a mistake that has a fortunate outcome. There is, however, as far as I could tell, not a word for a mistake that is inevitable. It's watching a train crash happen. There's no way of stopping it. You can just stand there and watch it happen. And the mistake that Ernst made was to take a handful of pearls and cast it in front of a room full of swine. Now, I'll hasten to add that I say this in the idiomatic sense. I will never, ever, ever, in any other way except for idiom, compare any people to any animal. Okay? I just want to state that categorically. Using the biblical idiom of pearls in front of swine, that is indeed what happened. Ernst should have stuck to his first point on his debate where he said, if the government is so keen and eager to give property to the impoverished masses, take the land, which is already informal settlements, where people are informally staying on, and give those people title deeds. Simple as that. Simple as that. Do that for us, and then we could talk about the farms. Put your money where your mouth is, ANC government, and then we can talk about the farms and the farmers. Now, obviously, you don't want that to happen. If the government steal from themselves and give it to the population, there is, in fact, some advantage in that for the government, because you give a title deed to a person, and now he needs to pay property tax. Now, they probably did that mental arithmetic, and therefore they concluded the ANC government obviously see no sense in that, so that will likely never happen. It's breaking down this last bastion of whiteness. Now, as you guys know, I refrain as far as possible in color coding problems. Okay, so here in the land of the monochrome rainbow, I am colorblind. I do not look at the pigmentation in one's skin. I force myself, I've retrained my brain, I've gone through great pains to achieve this retraining of my mind not to see color. And color coding is indeed very convenient, except that cultural groupings is a reality. And history has taught us that diversity in proximity equals conflict. And we are certainly on borrowed time. I typically use a example where much smaller circumstances or happenings or trigger points caused riots to the point where big cities are looted and burned to the ground. Rodney King is probably the first one comes to mind, and more recently Ferguson, Missouri in November of 2014. So yeah, Ernst should have just stuck with this one point saying, put your money where your mouth is. Forget about all the other emotional things. Another thing I picked up is that Ernst, being an academic, speaks in philosophical idioms. At one stage, he spoke about a straw man argument, which anybody that has half a mind and read the first chapter of any book in philosophy would know that that is like this, the no true Scotsman's fallacy. It's one of the philosophical idioms that one use. And immediately, one of the members of parliament rushed towards taking it as an insult. I wouldn't necessarily say a racial slur, but an insult. The thing that hurt me the most, and I have to force myself not to color code the situation, but all of the members of the ANC took their turns to take a lashing at Mr. Roots, who took it all very graciously. And he just stood there doing his name justice, looking very earnest, looking them straight in the eye and not flinching for a minute. And then another person from a whole other side of the room, you can count on it that I would put the links in the description below of this particular video, at 36 minutes in exactly. It's quite synchronistic maybe that there was 2 lashings from 2 persons of the same people's group that Aaron's Roots belonged to, and it was exactly at 34 minutes and at 36. It's where Steve Swartz from the ACDP, that is the African Democratic Christian Party, said to, and it was almost like it was peer pressure, he said to Aaron's, just we're building bridges here, man. Aaron's, just shut up, man. Let this thing go. Let them have the farms. Let them steal as much as they can. Because Aaron's is the voice of sanity. He is the only one that's pleading for the rule of law in this country. Aaron's and his very good organization called AfriForum, and please send them some money. They are not shy to ask for money, and I don't get a commission. I know nobody that works there personally, but please send them money. They need your money to do all this good work. And I do also believe that we must perhaps go over into action in the near future. I am nothing if not practical, and I want to suggest we start a crowdfunding campaign where they get support monetarily in cryptocurrency. Because, I mean, the irony of this is if we send Aaron's money or even AfriForum, that money's probably get taxed. So ironically, the contributions that we make, I might be wrong about this, but the contributions that we make then gets taxed, and then the opposition gets a chunk of that same donation. So I definitely do think we should help these guys out in a way where there wouldn't be a benefit to the opposition. But nevertheless, what Aaron's is saying is, this is theft. And he should communicate it to the opposition in this bite-sized chunks. The opposition would come back with rhetoric saying, oh, but you stole it in the first place, hundreds of years ago, through whichever method, call it conquering or invading it ignorantly, not knowing that tribes or the people's grouping that was staying on that piece of land was on holiday in the Bahamas for 3 weeks, and in that time you found it to be uninhabited, and you just put up your houses and your fences there and brought in the rule of law and the European way, and when they got back from holiday, there was people living on their land. That is basically the rhetoric that the opposition, the ANC and the EFF is basically coming up with. That comes to about a moot point. Now, I don't agree with the ANC, and I do agree with Aaron's that in this current day and age, the rule of law is very important to instill consumer confidence in this country. Also, food dependency. The minute the farmers suspect that their farms are in jeopardy, they would cease to become productive. At the very least, what will happen, and I've heard this from a few people, is where they collateralize all their debt. All the cousins and all the aunts and uncles and everybody's children basically goes to university and overseas holidays, and they max out all their credit cards, and the farm is basically collateral for all of it. So when such time comes where EWC becomes a reality, you just declare bankruptcy and you walk away, and you had a grand time. You basically have an education that's paid for, you have all the designer clothes on your back, and you've got the memories of all the overseas holidays, which is obviously just another way of stealing, if you think about it, declaring bankruptcy. But the fact is, the government have this uncanny ability to bring out this phenomenon, which is the law of unintended consequence, right? I always cite this one example of where there was a disarmament attempt in America where Walmart got on the bandwagon and said, we'll give you a $50 voucher if you bring in any firearm, like any firearm, working, not working, old or new. And people would literally come in with bazooka launchers. Now, a bazooka launcher is basically a tube. A metal tube for which you can't get any ammunition, right? It's impossible for a civilian to get a rocket for a bazooka. And people would trade these in for $50. But what also happened is that genuine gun dealers would walk up and down the lines where people stood with all their unusable or excess or firearms that they no longer want for whatever reason, and they would make these people better offers than the $50 that Walmart offered, by a proxy of the government, I should perhaps say, because Walmart contributed. I didn't think they sponsored it wholesale, but a lot of these things in this example happened on Walmart parking lots. And the only thing that the government and Walmart caused to happen is to take out all the non-working firearms from circulation, and all the ones that was laying in cupboards somewhere gathering dust was bought by real firearm dealers and got serviced and cleaned and got sold to people that was able and willing to use said firearms. So yes, government, law of unintended consequences. Not a month goes by where the government, with the best of intentions, passes a law that disrupts my life. I mean, I know people listen to this are probably supporters of small government. I wouldn't necessarily say anarchist. Let the free market sort itself out. And such a massive interference in the free market enterprise, property rights, the rule of law, it will basically signal to everybody in this country that it's a free-for-all. That would definitely expedite the scenario that we see in Mad Max. So like my good friend Styx Hexenhammer always say, that is about all.